What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And joining me is Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter in Boston, just got to witness potentially or arguably the most exciting win of the Cleveland Cavaliers this season. And Chris, I don't want to get into the game right away. I want to get into the atmosphere. The Cavs felt like they were out of it. Second quarter, third quarter, first quarter, down 25-3. And this Cavs team came back from its largest victory this season. What were you feeling in the arena? You talked to our subtexter saying you couldn't hear yourself. Talk me through the environment and what was going on.
Look, I mean, it was a dream start for the Celtics, and it looked like Boston was coming out to send a message about Eastern Conference supremacy to the team that is supposedly their greatest threat in the Eastern Conference, their greatest threat to a repeat. Like, Joe Mazzulla didn't even want to talk before the game about how much better the Cavs have gotten and how different these Cavs are, because he just didn't want to instill that confidence in them, and he didn't want to start giving them credit and talk about the wholesale changes that are different about the Cavs this year. So there were some mind games going on, and it was clear that the Celtics were taking this one with a little bit more oomph, and you could feel that from the crowd. You could feel that from the players as well, even though they didn't have Kristaps Porzingis. They didn't have Drew Holiday. They were coming off a loss against Detroit. They were at home. It was the quote-unquote number one seed in the Eastern Conference, and the way that they played at the beginning of the game, there was intensity, there was a physicality, there was a purpose, and it was the same thing in the arena. Like, from the opening tip, even before the opening tip, Ethan, every member of the Cavs during pregame introductions got booed heartily. Every single one of them. And the loudest ones were reserved for Donovan Mitchell. But that's just the kind of environment it was. That's just the way that the fans were approaching the game. And you felt that. And when they went on the run that they went on, 8-0, then 11-0, then 25-3. I mean, it was ear-splitting inside that arena. They felt something really, really special coming from the Celtics. And for the Cavs to withstand that punch, it wasn't the Celtics' best punch, okay, because it wasn't a full-strength Celtics team, but it was a punch nonetheless by a really, really good basketball team in a really, really difficult place to play. And the Cavs kept their composure. They showed toughness. They showed fight. They showed trust. They showed resiliency, and they were able to, stay within themselves and believe in one another that they could still do it. Darius Garland said the tone in the second timeout huddle was, oh boy, we're in trouble. But, they stayed connected. They took the punch from the Celtics, and they responded the way that you would expect the number one seed in the Eastern Conference to do so. And the Cavs have done it basically all season long.
And Chris, I think it's important to note that there were fantastic performances on each side. Starting off with the Cleveland Cavaliers, you have to Donovan Mitchell. And to his credit, he had 41 points when the game was all said and done. He didn't have the best first quarter, but for the remaining three quarters, he had 10 or more points in each quarter to help the Cavs get back into the fight. And we saw a lot of fight from him. And the other thing coming into this game, we know that Donovan Mitchell is one of the best points per game players against the Boston Celtics since Michael Jordan, right? Mm-hmm. And we understand that this is a team. This is a game. This is an organization that wants to beat the Celtics dating back to the LeBron James era, right? But when we talk about a guy like Donovan Mitchell who came in talking about habits, talking about wanting to set a tone, talking about wanting to get to the Eastern Conference Finals, NBA Finals, because we know he hasn't been there yet. This was a test for him and a test for the entire team to showcase that they could help him rise to the occasion. They had to fight back in that sense, right? Not only did the Boston Celtics have a 20-plus point lead, but Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown combined for 83 points when the game was all said and done. That is ridiculous. And I understand that Kristaps Porzingis is out and Drew Holiday is out. But the actual point that I'm going to make to you is that those two players don't get the same amount of shots if those two players are available. More so, deeming to Kristaps Porzingis, who is going to take 12 to 20 shots a game, depending on what the situation is per game in a 7-game series. So I don't know if I'm not going to say that they aren't capable of doing this in a playoff series, in a playoff game, combining for 83 of the team's 116 points. But I would say it's an anomaly for two players to combine for that kind of stretch and without one of the most crucial pieces on their team. I don't know if he's going to be able to calculate that amount of difference for a team while taking the amount of shots that he does, even when we talk about what we said before this game, when Evan Mobley is able to shut him down defensively better than he has an opportunity against smaller guards that are quicker, faster, might have a little bit more strength, that like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. What do you think about how the game changed because of Kristaps, Drew Holiday being out, but also noting what Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum were able to do?
Well, the biggest thing is that the Celtics run out of depth really quick when they don't have two of their most important players. And that was on display. And it's not necessarily about Kristaps, and it's not necessarily about Drew. Like, some of it is about them and their skill set. But it's the other guys that they're forced to rely on because they don't have those guys occupying those minutes. Case in point, in a 7-game series in the Eastern Conference Finals, are the Celtics going to play Sam Hauser 38 minutes like they did tonight? No. There's absolutely no chance. Not if the Celtics are at full strength or close to full strength. Are they going to play some dude named Drew Peterson for a minute and a half? No, they're definitely not. But, like, it was the Sam Hauser thing that stood out to me, Ethan. Like, because so much of what the Cavs were able to do on the offensive end of the floor, especially in the fourth quarter, when it came to putting the game away and making clutch shots and generating quality offense, they just put Sam Hauser in every single action and they attacked him. Sometimes it was Darius, sometimes it was Donovan. And when you have a huntable player like that, you're just going to continue to prey on that weakness over and over and over again. But is that weakness going to exist to the same level in a potential playoff series between these two teams if the Celtics are at full strength? No. He's not going to play 38 minutes. He might play like 8 minutes in that game. So one of the questions that I have coming off of tonight's win, and it was a great win for the Cavs. They showed a lot of guts. They showed a lot of toughness. They showed a lot of mental fortitude. But one of the questions that I have coming off this game is, can they be the kind of offense that they want to be when they don't have that huntable player out there? Because Sam Hauser is not going to be out there. It's going to be Drew Holiday instead. Are you really going to attack Drew Holiday that same kind of way? Who are you going to put into the action over and over and over? It was the same thing over and over and over again in the fourth quarter. It was, all right, who is Sam Hauser guarding? That guy goes set the screen. And you know Boston's going to switch. Now we're just going to torch Sam Hauser, right? But if that's Drew Holiday, like, who are you attacking? Are you attacking Jason Tatum? Are you attacking Jaylen Brown? Are you attacking Derek White? Are you attacking Drew Holiday? Are you attacking Kristaps? Are you attacking Torrey Craig if they use him more frequently throughout the course of the playoffs? You know what I mean? So it's just like the pathway to the Cavs' offensive success tonight, I don't think is going to exist to the same level when they get into the playoffs. And that just makes me wonder about how are the Cavs going to consistently generate quality offense. On the other side of it, I think there's a reality that the Cavs are faced with here. And I brought up the topic with Kenny Atkinson before the game. It was the final question that he was asked in pregame. And because he had gone down the road of the DeAndre Hunter in the starting lineup, DeAndre Hunter in the finishing group kind of thing, and he didn't want to touch the starting lineup thing, which is fine. And he said, what's more important to the Cavs is who finishes games. So I said, okay, Kenny, have you had conversations with Jared Allen specific, knowing that they were going into a game against Boston and knowing the problems that the Cavs have when playing two bigs? I said, have you specifically talked to Jared Allen about the potential of not finishing games? And is he okay with it? Because this is not a series. When they get into the playoffs against the Celtics, Ethan, it is not a series for two bigs. It is not. They're going to have to make a choice. And they're probably going to start with Jared and Evan together because they don't want to be that drastic and change up their starting lineup. But they are quickly going to go away from the two bigs. And they're going to go to Dean Wade, and they're going to go to DeAndre Hunter. The Celtics series is a DeAndre Hunter, Dean Wade, Evan Mobley series. That's the successful front court. That's the blueprint for the Cavs against these Celtics. They have played 4 games against the Celtics this year. In 58 combined minutes, with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley on the floor together, the Cavs have a net rating of minus 32.1. That is horrendous. Their offensive rating, with both of them on the floor together, is 90. That ain't going to work against the Celtics. Their defensive rating, with both of them on the floor, is 122. That ain't going to work against the Celtics. So, the beauty of having Jared and Evan together is the rebounding advantage, the defensive advantage, and you just kind of accept that there might be some limitations offensively. But if they can't hang defensively, and if the Celtics are fully comfortable just attacking Evan Mobley or Jared Allen off the dribble the way that Jason Tatum was, then there just isn't anything gained for the Cavs by playing both those guys together. And what they miss out on is so significant that they can't consistently play them together for long stretches against the Celtics. So if we're looking for what's translatable to a playoff series between these two teams in the Eastern Conference Finals, it's the fact that Sam Hauser is not going to be out there just thrown to the wolves the way that he was tonight. And Jared and Evan together is not going to consistently work against the Celtics. And it's a series for DeAndre Hunter, Dean Wade, and Evan Mobley, not for Jared Allen. Or at least not for Jared Allen and Evan Mobley together.
So you mentioned those players, right? And I think that's a great point. And I think you're absolutely right. And I had this conversation with people tonight when I was talking about tonight's game and Jared Allen not being a factor in the second half. He played 9 minutes in the second half, Chris, right? And we're talking about a member of the core 4. And we're not talking about this is going to be significant for the remainder of the season. We're not talking about this is going to be significant for every playoff series. But against the Boston Celtics, this is a team that has problems for Jared Allen, and we saw them significantly in the first half of tonight's game. He matched up against Jason Tatum multiple times. It did not work out in his favor. Right? Sometimes he was stuck on an island. Sometimes all of these different things. But then you talk about DeAndre Hunter, Dean Wade, Isaac Okoro, the 3 wings that the Cavs have coveted this season, and obviously DeAndre Hunter, who the Cavs went and got in mind for playing with against the Boston Celtics in the playoffs. DeAndre Hunter was great tonight. He had a great game in his first matchup against the Boston Celtics in a Cleveland Cavaliers uniform. He was 4 of 6 from the field, 3 of 3 from deep, grabbed down 5 rebounds. He had 12 points and was a plus 21 on the field. The only player with a better plus minus on tonight's game for the Cavs was Sam Merrill with a plus 22.
Nah, you
I
forgot
want to
about
talk.
Ty Jerome. Ty Jerome was Mr. Plus Minus with a plus 34 tonight.
Oh my goodness, how did I miss that?
Oh,
Oh
yeah,
my goodness.
plus
Okay,
34.
all right. Plus 34,
And I think
8
that's a
point.
big deal, Ethan. I think that's a big deal because I think there were questions about Ty and his athleticism and his ability to hold up against, a team like the Celtics that whips the ball around, that shoots a bunch of threes. Can he keep up with them? Is he athletic enough? Can he stay in front of them? Is he going to be too foul prone? And it was kind of strange that Kenny Atkinson went away from him so quickly in the first half, the way that he did. I thought that was a little bit bizarre. But I thought tonight was really, really important for somebody like Ty because, when we're talking about the Boston series, we're trying to figure out, okay, how many guys are playable against the Celtics? What combinations are playable against the Celtics? What four-man groupings are playable? What five-man groupings? And for Ty to be as effective as he was tonight against Boston, and for him to show that, yes, there is a place for him in this series, and he can be effective against their switching defense, against their physicality, against their length, their athleticism, their quickness, all those things. I thought that was a big deal because I was wondering just how much could Ty play in this kind of series against the Celtics. Would his lack of foot speed and athleticism catch up with him? It was not a problem tonight. He found a way to still make an impact out there every time he was given an opportunity. And the energy that he brought, the effort that he brought, the calmness that he brought, and the pace that he brought to the offense really changed the game after the Cavs dug themselves that big hole.
Yeah, and the first quarter was the biggest. It was the biggest scene for Ty Jerome to step on, right? You understand that sometimes there is only a first impression in these big time games, and Ty Jerome stepped onto the floor and had the most points in the first quarter for the Cavs with 8, right?
Mhm.
And all 8 of his points in the game came in the first quarter, and the Cavs could not have asked for anything more than that, right? And obviously, there were opportunities for him to score and all these other things. But his stability, and this is what we've talked about when it comes to Ty Jerome, his stability, his ability to just level out the offense and give exactly what is needed. Slow it down, speed it up, whatever.
Yeah.
But Chris, I want to talk about what the difference was on the defensive end for the Cavs in the first half rather than the second half. And I feel like we touched on it a little bit. Dean Wade, DeAndre Hunter, and Isaac Okoro on the floor together, I felt had great minutes together. But when it comes to the defensive scheme that they were put in, the Cavs were set up in a 2-3 zone to go up
Mm-hmm.
against a team in the Boston Celtics that shot over 50% in the first half from beyond the arc. That's not a successful rate, and we know that the biggest weakness of the zone, especially 2-3, obviously it changes when you shift it up or whatever, is the 3-point shot. Derek White had 2 big threes against that zone, and that's what gave them the momentum, along with Jason Tatum being able to play his ISO ball and Jaylen Brown doing the same thing. When I talk about a team that's able to shift their momentum from the first half to the second half, Jason Tatum had 30 points in the first half. Jaylen Brown had 19 points in the first half. In the second half, Jason Tatum had, excuse me, Jason Tatum had 16 points on 8 of 20 shooting, and Jaylen Brown had 18 points on 6 of 12 shooting. Kenny Atkinson mentioned it after the game. Jason Tatum was a monster tonight, and he had one of the best offensive performances against the team that he's seen in NBA history as a coach, right? And I think, Chris, when you look at how Kenny Atkinson consistently changes things throughout the offense, throughout the defense, and we've liked that about this season, I think there has been also times this year where he's made questionable decisions based on matchups and based on what the roster consists of against him, just to stick with the rotations that he's had in the past. Today felt like one of those days. I wanted to pick your brain on what Kenny Atkinson could have done better when it comes to defensive schemes against a team like the Boston Celtics, where two players were the main reason that this game was close.
Well, I think two things, Ethan. I think number one, the Cavs deserve a lot of credit for limiting the Celtics to 13 3-point attempts in the second half. We've talked about the math problem that sometimes the Cavs run into when playing against the Celtics. It's not that the Cavs can't keep up from 3-point range. They're one of the most prolific 3-point shooting teams in the NBA, just like the Celtics are. But in the first couple of matchups between the two teams, when the Celtics get to like 50 to 55 3-point attempts, that's their comfort zone. Then it becomes a math problem. Then it becomes really, really problematic for the opponent. So to have a fighting chance against the Celtics, you have to try and limit the number of 3-point attempts that they take. And I think because the Cavs continued to switch as much as they did, and because the Cavs continued to change up the looks, like there were times that Jason Tatum felt like it was advantageous for him to try and work in the post or drive. Jaylen Brown, the same kind of thing. The other thing that happened in the second half, and we cannot ignore it because it was one of the turning points in the game, Jaylen Brown took a couple of fouls early in the game that didn't seem like they were going to be that big of a deal. But then all of a sudden, you get into the third quarter. It's early in the third quarter. The Celtics are up by 14, and he picks up his fourth foul. And now all of a sudden, he's on the bench for the duration of the third quarter. The third quarter is when the Cavs made their second comeback. The third quarter is the Cavs getting the game into a reachable margin where it was a one-possession game going into the fourth quarter. So him picking up his fourth foul, and it was kind of an iffy call to begin with, that was a significant shift in the game because now all of a sudden, like I said, the Celtics are asking more of Sam Hauser. All of a sudden, one of their sources for offense that they could attack with, a guy who could play off of Jason Tatum, make it so that Tatum didn't have to do everything in the third quarter, make it so that Derek White didn't have as much to do in the third quarter, like all those different things. That was a big turning point in the game. But I do think that there's something to the Cavs' switchability and guys who can theoretically hold up in those switches that the Celtics seem to think are more advantageous than they are, that kind of takes them out of their rhythm and their flow offensively. The other thing that I'll say is that I think the Cavs' discipline on the offensive end in the second half was better than the Celtics' discipline. And I thought the Celtics had opportunities, just like they did in the first half, to find matchups that actually were advantageous. Pick out the guy that you want to put in the action. Is it Max Strus? Is it Darius Garland? Is it Evan Mobley on the perimeter off the bounce with a live dribble? Is it Jarrett Allen when he's out there? Like, find that guy that you think is advantageous for you, continue to put him in the action. I don't think the Celtics did enough of that. There were opportunities for them to attack Max Strus just like they did in the first quarter, and they didn't. There were opportunities for them to go at Darius Garland the way that they did for a lot of the first half, and they didn't. There were opportunities to take Evan Mobley off the dribble, pull him to the perimeter, take his rim protection away, and go at him that kind of way, and they didn't because they're just not as disciplined offensively. Whereas the Cavs, they saw the weakness, and they went at it over and over and over. They did not allow the Celtics, to do the things defensively that they wanted to do. They saw the matchup that they liked, and they went at it over and over and over again. So I think those were the factors that kind of stood out to me. But to me, it all goes back to Ethan. 13 3-point attempts for the Celtics in the second half. That is a win for the Cavs.
And I think that's also a testament to the limited amount of zone that the Cavs played in the second half. I don't think they played it as much as they did in the first half. They utilized their switchability with Isaac Okoro, Dean Wade, and DeAndre Hunter. And also Kenny Atkinson talked about it after the game, switching matchups. And we saw DeAndre Hunter being on Jason Tatum initially in sets rather than having to be switched on to or avoided entirely, because there were times where it felt like DeAndre Hunter was in the Isaac Okoro role. Thank God he hit threes better than Isaac Okoro did last year in the playoffs. But DeAndre Hunter was more so kept in the corner away from the Celtics creators in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, because they understood that was the entire point of the Cavs going and getting DeAndre Hunter ahead of the trade deadline. But I cannot end this podcast without saying this. And we've talked about Donovan Mitchell, and he had a great fourth quarter, and he led this team to this victory. But we said this as a preview yesterday. For the Cavs to win this game, Evan Mobley was going to have to play like Evan Mobley from Game 5 of last year in the series against the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference semifinals. For 3 quarters, he did not. He did not do that. And in the fourth quarter, he came out with a different sense of urgency. He came out a completely different player, right? He was a guy on a mission, rebounding, effort, putting in extra muscle, hustling to get boards that weren't his, and then also 9 to 10 straight buckets or straight points for the Cavs. That was the entire changer of this game and allowed the Cavs to pull out, because as much as we want to admit that this Cavs team is different, it felt eerily similar to last year, where Donovan Mitchell was doing a lot of the weight pulling for this team. And in the fourth quarter, Evan Mobley came to his rescue and said, hey, you have help. I am here. And that is the biggest takeaway from me today. Of Evan Mobley needs to be that guy for 4 quarters, not just one. And even Donovan Mitchell touched on it, on how he can be consistent in every aspect for the remainder of games this season and heading into the playoffs, as we know that these two teams are on a crash course for the Eastern Conference Finals.
Still need to see it against Kristaps Porzingis. In saying that, I do, because that matchup, I just wonder how many times Evan Mobley can thrive or succeed in that particular matchup. I still wonder about that. In saying that, he was terrific in the fourth quarter, and it starts to feel like Evan Mobley is kind of the barometer for the Cavs, and how he plays, that reflects how the Cavs are playing. And for him to have that 9-1 run to open up the fourth quarter, and he scored all 9 by himself, 2 of those being no hesitation 3-pointers, big time from Evan Mobley. And I asked Kenny Atkinson after the game, Ethan, I said, what, if anything, did you see that was different from Evan in the fourth quarter compared to the first 3 quarters? And, part of it was he was in foul trouble. Part of it was, they were throwing some junky things at Evan on the defensive end of the floor. Like, he's used to being guarded a certain kind of way. The Celtics don't guard that kind of way. Sometimes he's being guarded by Derek White. Sometimes he'll be guarded by Drew Holiday when Drew Holiday is healthy. But there's like junky things that they do that are designed to take an offense out of its usual rhythm and make them a little bit befuddled, because they're unconventional, because of the personnel that they have. But I asked Kenny, I said, what, if anything, did you see that was different from Evan in the fourth quarter? He said, I have no idea, Chris. I thought he was deep in a hole. He was not feeling it. He was completely out of rhythm. But that's the mark of the growth of Evan Mobley. Like, he didn't allow 3 quarters to define the kind of game that he was going to have. He didn't allow 3 quarters to define the kind of imprint that he was going to put on the game. There was still an opportunity for him to do positive things at both ends of the floor. For him to have 8 freaking rebounds in a quarter, 8 in one quarter, and 4 of those on the offensive end of the floor, like that level of aggressiveness, creating those second chance opportunities, keeping Boston from getting rebounds and pushing in transition, all those things, they wore on the Celtics as the game was going on. And you could feel every time that Evan Mobley gobbled an offensive rebound. It was almost like 2 years ago in the playoffs, where every time Mitchell Robinson would get an offensive rebound against the Cavs inside, then Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, the fan base was like, ugh. We just defended our ass off for 23 seconds, and now this dude just inhales another offensive rebound to give him another chance. It was groans. It was murmurs. And that's what you felt in TD Garden every time. It felt like Boston was getting a stop, forcing Darius to miss or Donovan to miss or somebody to miss. There was Evan Mobley skying over everybody, getting a second chance opportunity, getting another offensive rebound. And, the confidence that he played with in the fourth quarter, the aggressiveness that he played with in the fourth quarter, the purpose that he played with in the fourth quarter, like that's how he's got to play against the Celtics for every single quarter. That's how he's got to play against the Celtics in every single game. And if that guy from the fourth quarter, if that's the guy that the Cavs get in a 7-game series against the Celtics, then they'll have a fighting chance. But if they get the guy from the first 3 quarters against the Celtics, we're probably talking about a sweep or a gentleman's sweep. Because I do think he's become a big barometer for this team's success. And the other thing, Kenny's not going away from him. Like, Kenny might go away from Max. Kenny might go away from Jarrett. Kenny might go away from Ty. But he's not going to go away from Evan. Like, Evan's going to be finishing these games against the Celtics. That is his responsibility. That is something that the Cavs really like to do. That is something that the Cavs believe in this matchup against the Celtics. So it's going to be up to Evan to reward that faith that they're going to put in him in a 7-game series against Boston. And he did that in the fourth quarter. Just brilliant in the fourth. He changed the game. He changed the game in the fourth quarter.
And they need him. They need him, Chris. And we've said this at length on this podcast. When it comes to Evan Mobley, if he can be the Cavs' best player, or if he can match the success of Donovan Mitchell, this team has a great opportunity to go very, very far in this year's playoffs. Not next year, not 2 years down the road, this year. And I think when we talk about just rebounding and all those different things, it was different in the first half. And for Evan Mobley, as you said, to have 8 rebounds in the fourth quarter, that is exactly what the Cavs needed to pull this win out on top of his scoring. There were 3 players to score for the Cavs in the fourth quarter. Donovan, Darius, Evan Mobley. That is the standard, right? And if you need to go to 3 players, that's who you hope you can call on when it comes to this Cleveland Cavaliers team. But the Cavs are 49-10, and they are heading on to their 10th straight win if they can go and defeat Portland. They're 9 wins in a row for the 3rd straight time this season. But with that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. This is where you can send in all your questions for us to answer on a daily basis directly to your phones. But you can only do this by signing up for a 14-day free trial or visiting cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast. It's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.